Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I'm joined by writer, director, composer, producer, musician, Chris Alexander. How you doing, man?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's an honor, man. Jack of all trades, looking into some of the things you've done. From 2009 to 2015, you served as the editor-in-chief for the iconic Fangoria magazine that we all know and love so much. And now you're the editor-in-chief and co-founder of the cult magazine Delirium, published and produced by Charles Band. So being a writer, how does that differ from being a writer with, so let's say, as a musician, being a writer and being a writer about horror? How are those two things so much different?
You know what it is? It's all about communication, right? So, and I think I learned this from a young age that to be, I think, a good writer, you have to know your voice. To be able to communicate that voice effectively in any medium, you have to kind of know music. And I don't mean you have to be some virtuoso or something like that. You have to have a sense of rhythm. You have to have a sense of knowing when to raise your voice, bring it down, pull it back, kind of keep people's interest and jerk their emotions around, you know? And that goes for being an editor too. And I don't mean just editing a magazine. I mean actually editing film or editing music.
Sure. You
have to know when to stop, to start, to cut, to communicate effectively. And I think you see a lot of people out there that maybe aren't great writers or aren't great communicators, but are trying to communicate, and you can see where they fail. It's just that they just don't know when to hold them and fold them, you know? So to me, the difference between being a writer, being a musician, being a filmmaker, there is no real difference. The medium is different, but the approach, for me anyways, is basically the same.
Okay. And the word you just used that I love is emotion. That's why I've always hated the label emo music, because people are like, oh, emo, it's emotional. If you're making music and it's not emotional, you're in the wrong business. Every style of music, no matter what style, no matter what genre, it's coming from straight emotion. So that's why I've never liked that title. And emotion is everything when it comes to music, no matter what you're doing, as well as writing. You've got to pour your emotions and your heart into everything. But more than that, you are also the writer, director, producer, and composer for the avant-garde horror films Blood of Irina. Am I saying that right? Irina?
Yeah, Blood for Irina, correct. Yeah.
Okay, Blood for Irina, Queen of Blood, Blood Dynasty, Female Werewolf, Space Vampire, Necropolis Legion. It knows you're alone. And then something I'm excited to talk about, your upcoming film, Girl with a Straight Razor. Now, what can you tell us about? I know you can't go too much into it, but what can you tell us about Girl with a Straight Razor?
I can tell you whatever you want to know. It's coming out in North America in November from Dark Side Releasing. They produced it. It's a West Coast Canadian company. All my movies are American or European, but this one was actually funded by my countrymen. So, because I'm from Toronto.
Right.
So, you know, we made this during the pandemic, during lockdown. The actress Ali Chappell and I, who was in Necropolis Legion, kind of put this project together, and we didn't have access to a lot of resources because there was nowhere to go. But that added to the isolation of the film and the sort of ingenuity in the sense that the character, who is I like to play with reality. I don't like to spell everything out. I like there to be ambiguity and dream logic and surrealism. So the fact that this character in this film basically is out there every night with her elongated razor, it's very much visually and essentially like a giallo film, but it's operating on a kind of psychological level. She's going out every night. The world turns red and she's opening as many throats as she can. But because we were, necessity being the mother of invention, we didn't have a lot of people to work with. We weren't allowed to work with a lot of people during this period in Toronto. Everything was locked down. So Ali basically plays every single character. She's out there murdering herself. And in true giallo fashion, or gentle fashion, when we go point of view from the giant razor, of course, it's my black leather glove that we see opening those throats. So, that was a necessity. It was an easy way to get a film done where we had very minimal people involved. But it was also kind of added a neat psychological bent to it, that this woman who is, probably insane, is actually every night with this death wish murdering herself over and over and over. So it's an interesting little film. We made it very quickly. Again, I cut it. We put it together. I did all the score and licensed a few tracks from the KPM library from David Cronenberg's Rabid, because the movie has a lot in common with Rabid. And Dark Side is finally releasing it this year in November here in North America on Blu-ray, DVD, and VOD. And then somewhere in Europe too, because they created, actually, this is funny to me, they created a European cut of it I mean, my director's cut is coming out in November, but there's actually a longer European cut that's a little bit different. That, you know, it's not my cut, but it's still interesting that the fact that, you know, another version of my movie exists and it'll be overseas. And I don't know when that's coming out, but soon.
Awesome. Do we have any idea what streaming services it's going to be on?
I don't know. I mean, the way it works with Darkside, they do, you know, kind of a limited edition release first, and then through MVD, they'll do a wider Blu-ray DVD release.
Okay.
And then, so then it's TVOD on whatever platform they use, and then it'll end up on Amazon Prime and Tubi and everywhere else. So eventually, if you don't buy a copy of it, you'll eventually be able to see it pretty much everywhere, I think. And I'm sure some jackass will end up pirating it, and it'll be, if you want to go that route, I mean, I'm not going to stop you. There'll be a way to find it. And that goes for all my movies have been pirated by some asshole somewhere. So, and you can't stop it. Once you make it, you give it to the world. It's theirs. It's great if you can profit a bit off it. But, you know, I'm never expected to get rich off this stuff. And the most important thing is that people see it. So however you see my stuff, see it.
Well, I'll try to stop it. Don't pirate shit. Don't be an asshole.
Well, that's the party line. I agree. And I don't pirate. You know, I don't agree with that. I think it's the death knell of all media. But, you know, I mean, I also have that kind of punk rock transgressive streak in me too that says, you know, steal it, do whatever you need to do to see what you need to see, you know, and then maybe next time pay for it, you know. First one's free. I'm
not above pirating, to be honest with you, because if I go and I buy a pair of pants, I try the pants on first, and if I like them, I buy them. If I do pirate something, if I do download something, if I enjoy it, I'm going to buy it because I want to support the people that made it, especially right now, like you're talking about with COVID and all these people that are struggling. Man, you guys have kept us entertained throughout this. You know, indie filmmakers have really stepped up and helped out a lot throughout the pandemic to help keep people entertained and keep us going through streaming services and the movies that you guys are making. So if you like what you see, buy it. Help these people that have helped us. That's the opinion I've always been under, whether it be with music or movies. If you like something, buy it. Help these people. I know it seems like a drop in the bucket, but every drop in the bucket adds up to fill that bucket. So make sure you're helping these indie filmmakers, man, because they love what they do, but we got to help them survive as well.
Yeah, I know it's you know, it's a great thing to say, but it's so hard to control it. And I don't care who says. Everybody's got dirty, sticky fingers somehow, somewhere down the line when it comes to consuming media, however they do it, you know, and we all break the rules. We can say we don't, but we do. And it's such a strange time and place to be involved in any hard media industry, whether it goes for film, music, whatever, it doesn't matter, because I'm not really sure how people are making money off anything really anymore. You know, we talked to Roger Corman about this, and he said that for the first time in his life, he has no idea where the business is going. You know, I work with Full Moon pretty steadily with Charlie Band, and I work together pretty closely with Full Moon Features, the channel. And back in the day, Charlie would be making money hand over fist at Blockbuster Video, you know, selling per unit Full Moon VHS, and they'd be lining the shelves. And yeah, I think he'd be making like $100, you know, wholesale each off these tapes. And, you know, he was selling, you know, tens of thousands of these titles. And now you put a movie up on streaming, and what do you get per view? Like maybe pennies, you know, like, right. I mean, what do you get? If pennies, I don't even know. So in the long term, how, you know, don't steal, don't do this, don't do that. Yeah. But also I think creators have to be smart. We have all this digital technology at our fingertips. We can make dimes look like dollars. We can do things that our forefathers back in the days of loading up 35 millimeter cameras and spending like an exorbitant amount of money for 2 minutes of film that they maybe use 10 seconds of. Didn't have these luxuries. We can cut a lot of corners, I think, as creators, and bring our production costs down considerably so that we don't have to gouge the consumer, because guess what? The consumer is going to find a way around our price point anyways. Yeah. So we better start conforming to the new reality. You know, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I grew up in a video store. My parents owned a video store growing up. So isn't that awesome?
No, my parents didn't own a video store. I said me too before you were, but I'm a video store guy too. I mean, that's how I got into all this stuff, right? So, right. Yeah.
And see, pirating back in the day was renting a video and never bringing it back. You dickhead.
Oh, really? Was that your pirating? Mine was 2 VCRs. Yeah, I mean, and then hoping to God, you'd rent the down market stuff because it didn't have any tape card on it. But sometimes when you rented like the Warner Brothers or Fox stuff, they would have like do you remember that? It would fade out.
Fade in and out and do this
but
shit.
But sometimes, you were so you didn't care. I mean, it's like, okay, so I got a shitty copy of this movie, but I can kind of see it every 10 seconds. And that's good enough.
And then you put if it didn't work, you put a piece of tape over the tab at the bottom so you could still record over it.
Well, you could do that. But again, they had these like eventually the studios put sensors on everything. So you couldn't properly pirate a good copy of it. Or, like I was on another podcast the other night and I was telling them a story about in Ontario, in Toronto, we had such an issue with finding uncut stuff because we had every province in Canada at the time had its own censor board. And in Ontario during that period in the 80s, it was brutal. It was like one step above like the video nasties. We didn't confiscate anything. Some a-hole just went in there with a pair of scissors and went snip, 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 snip.
Wow.
Here you go. So I remember getting Day of the Dead after reading so much about it as a kid in Fango. I would have been about 11, 12. And I was like, ooh, Day of the Dead, all right. Take it home. I look at the back. The running time was like 92 minutes. I think the full running time of Day of the Dead's like just under an hour 50. I think it's an hour, 116 minutes or something like that. Anyways, I was like, well, this is really short. And it had a sticker over the running time where the Ontario Censor Board put a sticker over it. I was like, it's interesting. You put it on. It was like, that movie's disgusting.
Yeah.
Dry, bone dry, but it wasn't even like real cuts. It was like, someone would put a gun to their head and be like, going to blow their brains. They'd be like, yeah, jump. Music would jump. Everything would jump. There wasn't a gut to be seen in it. I still loved it because I loved the energy that Romero had, and I loved Bub, and I loved all that stuff. But it was years later. We didn't have Blockbuster Video in Canada at all. And it was when I was about 17, 18, the first Blockbuster finally rode into town. And I remember my friends and I going through the aisles, and there I saw Day of the Dead. And I pick it up, I turn it around, and it's the full running time. I'm like, So I take that tape, I rented it, I brought it home, we put it on, and it was the uncut American, somehow an American copy had come over here with the Blockbuster empire. And it was like a religious experience, seeing this movie for the first time with, how disgusting that movie is and Savini's outrageous effects, which are still disgusting. And so what did I do? I mean, again, I'm mostly on the level, but you got to do what you got to do. I took my shitty Ontario copy. I took all the labels off it. I took all the labels off the Blockbuster. I swapped it out, and I gave them back the shitty Ontario cut. To this day still have that stolen version of the uncut Day of the Dead. And I just think of how many people must have gone into that Blockbuster and rented Day of the Dead and ended up with my bum copy of it.
Romero's looking down
and probably complained and said, what's going on here?
Romero's looking down right now like, I'm so proud of you, Chris.
Oh, listen, I knew George really well because he lived in Toronto for many years. We were almost neighbors and did a lot of work together. And I told him that story, and he approved. He approved.
I bet he did, man. I could totally see that. That's so rad. Well, man,
yeah.
With horror, it's something that once you get into it, you either full blown or it's not your thing. I've never met anybody who's like, horror's okay. You're either all about it or it's just not your thing. But it all starts with us somewhere. So I want to take it back to the past now, Chris. And I want to talk about what got you started in the horror genre. And your first horror movie was?
Yeah, well, my first horror movie, my experience with horror details before the movie. Because I'd seen a Kiss album cover in the library, Love Gun, and Gene Simmons with his fangs, and I was just blown away. What was I looking at? I'd never seen a vampire before, and I became obsessed with Kiss, and I still, like, to this day, I'm a huge Kiss junkie. But that was a Ken Kelly painting, so it looked like the cover of Vampirella, because he did some of those too, right? So it was like, holy shit, what am I looking at? And I was scared of it. I had nightmares of Gene Simmons. I didn't know who Gene Simmons was. So I'd seen that. I'd been to the House of Frankenstein Wax Museum in Niagara Falls, Canada. Scared the shit out of me. But I became obsessed with that. And my dad would watch Twilight Zone all the time, reruns of the Zone. So I'd seen all that stuff and loved the Twilight Zone. Never really thought of it as horror, but I knew it was something dark and psychological and unsettling. There was it was a vibe. I didn't understand it most of the time, but there was a vibe. My first movie I remember seeing, it was a matinee on Channel 2 or something, a Buffalo station that we got in Toronto, WGRZ maybe. And it was a witch being dunked into water in one of those big wooden mechanisms, screaming, ah! Yeah. It was like all disgusting. And it must have been like a battered old 16 millimeter print as everybody screened back in those days on television. So the colors were all blown out and saturated, and it didn't look like something that took place in this universe. And I didn't know what it was, but it scared the hell out of me. And I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. Years later, I found out it was Michael Reeves' The She-Beast, which is it the guy who made The Conqueror Worm, Witchfinder General. This was his first film. So that was the first movie I saw a clip of. I had a Batman comic around the same time. He was fighting Blockbuster. And on the back of it, there was the movie poster for Phil Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers with the people running and their silhouettes like roots in the ground. And I was like, wow, what's this? This is really scary. I don't know what I'm looking at, but it seems like something ripped out of my nightmares. I don't know what it is, but I knew it was a movie. So I said to my parents, could we see this movie? And they said, no. You're like 4. No, we're not going to see it. It was rated PG, but PG back in 78 was a very different PG than we would have today, right? There's nudity in that movie, Gorgolo. Anyways, so I wasn't allowed to see it. But in 79, my parents went out to see Apocalypse Now. And City TV in Toronto, Toronto Station, had the world premiere or the nation premiere of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I was like, yes, I can finally see it. Now I'm 5. I'm ready to go. And they explicitly told the babysitter, and I can remember my mom wagging her finger, literally wagging her finger, do not let him watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Well, of course, the babysitter falls asleep. And we had one of those old push button converters, with the cord attached to the TV. And I knew where City TV was. So I put it where it needed to be. And just in time to see Donald Sutherland smashing his own clone's head. That disgusting scene where the goop comes out of the prosthetic dummy. And there's that soundtrack. It's Danny Zietlin's soundtrack. And it's actually a sample of a fetal monitor going.
Yeah.
And again, I was so scared. I scrambled and I changed the channel. But I was terrified. I remember going to bed later, terrified even knowing that this movie existed and that it was actually still playing. I knew I was asleep. I wasn't watching it, but I knew it was happening. It was in real time. Other people were watching it. So it was those experiences leading up to Invasion of the Body Snatchers that kind of sealed the deal where this was the path I was going to be on as far as like fixating on even not so much horror cinema, but just weird shit,
Sure.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to actually go back and rewatch Invasion?
Not too long, because it ended up getting played on TV ad nauseum. And I think we ended up getting, we lived in a condo in Toronto, and they eventually got a satellite dish in about 1980, 81. Mm-hmm. And back then, the cable channels, we didn't have HBO. We had something called First Choice, which was kind of like HBO, but there was only a certain amount of movies that they would play every month. So they would play them over and over and over.
Sure.
And I remember, so let's say it was about 82. And that's when Body Snatchers started being played a lot. City TV would play it a lot. And I saw it in its entirety with my father. And never mind the head bashing scene, never mind the gore. It was the final shot of the movie where Sutherland, points to the camera. Yeah. And the camera zooms in and there's no music over the end credits. The finality of that, I think that coupled with Planet of the Apes, which has a similar kind of finality to it, was, really, really scary for me. And Paul Schrader's The Cat People would be played all the time. And funnily enough, Ivan Reitman's Heavy Metal, the animated Heavy Metal. And they would show, and I'm like 6, 7. I shouldn't have been watching heavy metal. My parents were like, libertines. They didn't care. And then we'd watch it together. And it was on like, literally, I'm not kidding. It was on every day. And Escape from New York. Like these things were on every day, fully uncut. So yeah, I once I hit like a certain age, I was watching everything and anything that could come my way. I'd have my TV guide would come in on Saturday in the paper and I'd underline whatever movies looked good. And I quickly found out that my Leonard Maltin book, which way before in the internet, we all had our Leonard Maltin video book. I memorized titles, running times, alternate titles, cast, I memorized that book. But I came to realize that if it was like a 4-star movie, it was going to be great. If it was like a 3-star movie, it might not be that great. But if it was 2, it's going to be better. Because Taxi Driver was getting 2. Escape from New York was getting 2. Like all this like weird, cool stuff was getting 2 stars. But if it got a bomb, it was going to be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like Fulci Zombie, all that down market shit, it was going to be crazy. So I would circle it all on the TV guide and I'd sleep with an alarm clock. And when it rang, because we didn't have VCRs back then, we're still not quite in that era yet. I would walk down the stairs of my house and sit in front of the TV in the dark. and watch these movies with the volume barely up at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning by myself and just have my mind blown, you know?
Yeah, man.
And it's so funny. I remember my aunt looking at me doing this in the Saturday paper, da-da-da, and I wasn't into sports or anything. I remember her going, she was shaking her head. She said, "Is that all you do?" And to this day, it's like that was like a knife in my stomach because I felt bad. I'm like, why am I supposed to feel bad about loving all this shit? I shouldn't
Right.
be, you know? And then, you know, I love my aunt. She's great. But, you know, flash forward, you know, 35, 40 years later. And I've literally made my life, feed my children, everything else on this stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain sense of vindication, I think. And I think that's for all of us who love this stuff and have stuck with it when it's paying off at the end. And we know that we're not alone. There's a certain sense of vindication from the people that kind of, again, wag their fingers at us.
Yeah. It's so worth it.
Totally.
And especially with what you're talking about there, because it is like that. You have people in your family that are like, oh, what? More horror movies, more horror stuff. And it's like, listen, this is my passion. I love this. This is what I want to do forever. And now as a 35-year-old, I'm saying the same thing. This is a passion for me. I love doing this. And I want to go back to something you said, because some of our younger viewers might not be aware of this, but you were talking about movies being PG and being absolutely insane. Back then, we didn't have a PG-13 rating. So a lot of these movies that you look at as PG, like Tourist Trap as well as another one, these movies are scary as hell, but they weren't quite at that R rating. So back then, it was either PG or R. That was what you had. You didn't have that middle ground of a PG-13. So there's a lot of movies that got played on afternoon network television that were considered PG movies that were scary as hell. And that's how I seen Tourist Trap for the first time. It was on Fox 36. And I remember watching the movie and being terrified of that film.
Totally, because Tourist Trap is, like, again, like a nightmare. But I think it was back then, I remember it was like the big thing in the 70s wasn't the gore, really, and it wasn't the, well, yeah, because there was nudity in Body Snatchers. There was nudity and you know, adult content and a lot of PG shit. Jaws is PG. I mean, there's all that stuff's PG. But or GP, that was like another one that was right before PG. I think it was called GP, which was kind of like PG. But anyways, but it was if you had profanity, if you mixed profanity in there, that's when it went to the R. You know, it jumped because you could swear words were way worse than having, like, you know, somebody's guts coming out and stuff. You know,
right?
I mean, I again, I'm saying that within reason. I remember watching Beneath the Planet of the Apes on television. And out of all the original 5 Apes movies, if you're a fan, which I am, that's the most nihilistic, I think. Because at the end, no spoilers. Well, spoilers, of course, because if you haven't seen that, then you have a problem. You go see it immediately. But it doesn't end well. It's a time loop thing, but that's the one where the planet blows up. So, like, everybody, literally everybody dies. But before they do, you know, we have Charlton Heston, James Franciscus, what's his face? Maurice Evans as Dr. Zayas. They're all shooting each other, having a big blowout. The mutants are getting blood. Literally, blood is going everywhere. Charlton Heston gets shot, riddled with bullets. Yeah. And as he's like spitting blood, and there's blood, pools of blood around him, he's reaching for the A-bomb button. And he's like, "God damn you all," and it blows up the planet. And then there's like credits, very brief credits. And then the card comes up, rated G. And I remember seeing this going, G? Holy, I mean, you had a choice to take your kids to see Pete's Dragon or Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I mean, but that was the way it was. The MPAA just didn't want, you know, Midnight Cowboy was dangerous because there was a boob and a bump, but a lot of swearing. It got the X, you know, originally. MPAA didn't want you hearing the bad words, or God help you if you mentioned God, you know, exorcist, anything with any kind of blasphemy, you know, was problematic. But you know, people blowing the shit out of each other and ghouls and goblins and nightmarish content that's going to scar you for life, like Tourist Trap. That's okay, man. That's cool. It's a family movie, man. Bring the kids, you know? And then the word turned somewhere. And then the 80s became very paranoid, and, you know, it's satanic panic. But it's amazing. And then one thing about horror movies, too, we're talking like this, if you want to intellectualize it, which we always end up doing when we stick around with it long enough, because we see the social trends and the political trends change, and film change with it, pop culture change with it. And if you really want to, you know, kind of study the movements in Western culture, look at their cinema, and especially their horror cinema. You know, it's kind of this weird, uncanny mirror. So yeah, I mean, crazy.
Yeah, and it's the thing that you just mentioned too, scare the shit out of you is just fine. And honestly, I remember more of the scary things from when I was young than I do the curse words or the boobies in the movies. So I think that they totally had that backwards on what they should have been rating them. A question I always ask everybody on here. I know how horror started for you now, but now I want to go scream on you here for a second, my friend. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie?
It's not that one. I'll tell you that. I don't like Scream. I'm sorry. I've tried. Maybe I was too old. In the 90s, I was very like, fuck mainstream Hollywood. You know, give me European shit. I was digging deep. And when Scream came out, to me, it was that nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We'll give you some horror, but then we're going to tell you that it's just a joke. And I was not into that stuff at all. To me, like Return of the Living Dead, American Werewolf in London, those are horror comedies because they balance it so beautifully. Scream wasn't mine. So that's the one I don't like. I don't like any of those movies. And apologies to people that do. I'm not saying that they're good, they're bad. It's all subjective. But for me, not so much. But the movie behind me there, Dawn of the Dead, is my number one movie of all time. It fluctuates. I mean, there's about, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. What's your favorite scary movie?
Yeah.
You can say the one that you revisit the most, but I mean, it's tough because they all orbit. It depends what mood you're in. And sometimes you go back to something and you're like, oh my God, that's like, no, that's my favorite. No, that's my, no, that. So I have and I tried one day to narrow it down. I got to about 100 and then I said, I can't do this anymore. So there's about 100 that I cite as my favorite, but the one that informs everything I do, that gives me the most satisfaction every time I revisit it, is Dawn. Because it's the best, it's the best character study. It's like an existential drama. It's a war movie. It's a satire. It's an adventure. It's, a transgressive gore fest. It's a tragedy. I mean, Romero was firing on every cylinder known to man with cinema, I think, making that thing. And it was literally a once in a lifetime experience where everything just kind of came together in a very crazy way, and everyone who was involved in that movie was game, and they swung for the fences, and I just get so much out of that movie, and I have a personal connection to it too. That's, we could fill 2 shows just me telling you my history with Dawn, but it's definitely Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead scared me. It's energized me, and every time I watch it, same deal. And I'm really happy to report that I have 3 little boys. I'm a single dad, 14, 12, and I'm 10. But, I was scared to show them Dawn of the Dead because it scared me when I was a kid.
Yeah, man.
It doesn't scare them now. They weren't scared of it, but they fucking love it. Especially my middle child. It's all about Dawn. He just loves Dawn of the Dead in every incarnation. I collect 16 millimeter prints. We have a 16 print of Dawn that was actually Romero brought here in 79 to Toronto when he was a guest, and he forgot it, and it stayed here. And somehow through various traders and collectors, I inherited that print. And so it's a big part of our household. And yeah. And again, my personal connection to George too. It definitely, without a doubt, Dawn of the Dead, many have tried to imitate it, including Romero himself, and few have even come close.
I would actually, because I know a lot of people don't consider Dawn to be a direct sequel to Night, but I think Dawn of the Dead is one of the best sequels ever made. It's up there, Well,
the 3 of them are sequels in the sense that they kind of, they're at different stages of the evolution of that virus, or whatever it is. But they, obviously, as each one of them has a completely different identity, cinematically, sonically. There's no through line with the cast. Even the zombies look radically different in each incarnation. Mm-hmm. So each one stands on its own, but they still feel like a cohesive trilogy. When George went past that with the other stuff, that feels like something else. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like it's part of that universe. That felt like a consistent. There's definitely like a feeling of evolution in those movies. As George is a filmmaker, the ideas, the refinement of those ideas. What started with Night as kind of like a ripoff, by Romero's own admission, of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, ended up becoming something that was uniquely his own by the time he got to Dawn and then Day. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say you're right. It's probably one of the greatest. I wouldn't call it a franchise. It's not the right thing to say because it's the work of a singular voice, but it's definitely a great film series, not just horror, but film series. Yeah.
Right. And it's one of those ones that, and I agree with you, because once you get past Day, when you get to like Land and Diary of the Dead, it doesn't feel like it has that cohesiveness that those first 3 had. And to sit down and watch Night, Dawn, Day, and just follow along with these three movies, even though, like you said, different character arcs, the zombies, even like you said, they're completely different. And even in Day, you get Bub, who is this icon now when it comes to zombies. But to watch those three movies back to back to back is such an amazing, fun time. I remember we did that one night at a party. We sat down, we watched Night, Dawn, Day, and it was just such an amazing time that I wouldn't trade for anything. And I'm so happy to have been able to meet George, and I'm happy to say that I'm a huge fan of his. And Of the Dead is one of my favorite. Like you said, franchise is a bad word.
Yeah, it's not a
series of
franchise.
film. Yeah. It's definitely one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, it's and again, I like those last three, and they're all. That's how I met George. As he came to Toronto, and he met a woman. My friend Suzanne. He met her. They married, and the incredible romance in that last 10, 13, 14 years of his life. But they have different. I mean, Land is a studio film, and it feels like a studio film.
Yeah,
it feels like there was, and we know that Land was originally Dead Reckoning, and it was this big expansive thing that was kind of crushed down, and it feels crushed. It feels like it's too much, but not enough. There's a lot of stuff in there with the whole Fiddler's Green. It's very ambitious, but it doesn't have enough time to really flesh all that out. So It feels like a good start to something new. And because I think Land didn't do so great, and that's no fault of George's, it was the marketing, it was the timing. Universal pretty much dumped it. George had to retreat back to his independent roots, but again, he was doing it in Toronto. And so Survival and Diary, they just don't have the same vibe. I love them. I love them for very different reasons, because I can see where George is at different parts of his life. And I love Survival too, even though Survival, a lot of people don't like. I love it because it was George's last word. He was making a Western, a full-blown Western, and shoehorning his ghouls into it. So I appreciate it. There's a sense of melancholy about it I really like. But they don't feel like it's missing something. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's just maybe Richard Rubinstein, his influence at that time in the 80s for those pictures, because Creepshow's another masterpiece, and Night Riders is a masterpiece. But then again, because Rubinstein did Martin too, and Martin is perfection as well. I don't know. Maybe it was a producer thing. I'm not sure what the problem was, what the deal was. But anyways, they're just radically different movies. Yeah.
Right. And I'm with you. I like Diary. I own Diary. I've been a fan of Diary for a long time. I like the found footage vibe that Diary gives off.
Yeah.
But it's just not the same as the other three. I completely agree with you in all aspects on that. So before we go, man, this has been an amazing time of being able to learn how horror started for you. But I want to remind everybody out there that all of the social media links are down in the description for Chris. So make sure you're checking out everything he does. Go to his website, check out everything that he's doing, because he's working his ass off. So we know that coming up, we got Girl with the Straight Edge, the Girl with the Straight Razor. What else can you tell us? Do you have anything else coming up after that that's going to be coming soon? Or is this kind of like all your eggs are in this basket?
No. It's totally, I'm a machine actually, and the pandemic's been good to me. I mean, I'm always a guy who likes to work alone. All my movies I write, direct, shoot them, cut them. I like to work alone. It's a control freak. I don't know about that. I know that when you don't have much time and you want to get something done, sometimes it wastes time and it clouds up the vision if you bring too many people on board. So sure. During the pandemic, I was like a machine. I got so much done. I got book deals. I made 3 movies, but Charlie and I, we run this channel, Full Moon Features. There's a handful of us. But I run Delirium Magazine. It's Charlie and I invented that mag. I'm the editor in chief. It's my baby. But we decided, look, we have our own channel. We could just keep producing stuff, movies. And Charlie's been doing that, spending big money on Puppet Master sequels and everything else. And I said, look, Charlie, let's bankroll small chunks of money, and we give them to directors and give them complete creative freedom to do what they want. We won't lose because we're creating content. We're paying $10,000 to license an old Jess Franco movie for the channel. Why not make our own Jess Franco?
Right.
So we started Delirium Films, and It Knows You're Alone was the first film that I made for Delirium Films. And now I'm full throttle. I go to Cameron 2 weeks on the second one, which is, speaking of film series that I love, Armando de Osorio's Blind Dead series are a huge deal for me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm making my own Blind Dead movie. I'm
That's
making
awesome,
Scream of the Blind Dead, which is kind of like a weird proto. I'm not going to say feminist, but I always I'm like Canada's Jean Roland. I like, kind of beautiful, earthy women in my movies. So I'm turning the Templars into the whole mythology a little bit different, almost like a Joan of Arc kind of deal. But it's also kind of like a metaphysical slasher Western kind of, it's hard to explain, but I'm shooting it in 2 weeks. So it's going to be what it's going to be. Shot very quickly with very little money, high concept, a lot of style. I'm doing the music as usual. And so that's the next one. And then after that, I'm shooting another movie called Flesh for Christina for a Canadian company in November. So my 2021 is pretty much, my dance card is full. Let's put it
That's
that way.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. It's cool to take something that you've loved for a long time and be able to make it your own. And with Full Moon, I bought the Puppet Master Blu-ray box that they have. I do have the streaming service. So it's so cool to know that you're so greatly involved with that, because I'm a huge fan. And working with you is something that's a dream for me, because all the work that you've done with Fangoria, Full Moon, these things that I grew up loving, and now I get to talk to you about how all that was. So, man, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today. This has been amazing. One last reminder, everybody, please check out all the social media links. Please check out the website so you can follow along. You don't got to wait for me to give you updates on what he's doing, because you can get them on your own. Don't go anywhere, brother. I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure, man.
Everybody
sure,
else,
go.
as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.